Victoria's Deputy Premier Ben Carroll has told Premier Jacinta Allan he will put his hand up to become Labor leader. In a statement, he says it wasn't an easy decision, but the stakes at the upcoming election are simply too high. A delegation of Labor ministers met with Jacinta Allan earlier this morning, urging her to step down. But the Premier has vowed to go down swinging. State political reporter Rachel Eddy has more.
A cross-factional delegation of ministers and MPs met with the Premier Jacinta Allan this morning just after 10 a.m. and told her that she no longer had the support of caucus and urged her to resign. The Premier asked the ministers in that grouping to resign from their positions, but they have refused. Last night, the sub-factional leaders in caucus met and agreed that Jacinta Allan had lost support of the caucus. However, she has written to Labor State Secretary Steve Stakos this morning and called on the party to prepare for the possibility of a contested leadership ballot. And that would really be a diabolical result for Labor. It would drag this out for weeks. Now, Jacinta Allan has been struggling in the polls for months. The state election is just 4 months away on November 28, and she's been particularly under pressure over alleged corruption on the government's transport infrastructure program. She refused to call a royal commission, but a growing cohort of MPs believe that the government needs to launch some form of inquiry to get to the bottom of this.
Well, today's leadership tensions follow ongoing speculation over Jacinta Allan's leadership. Only a month ago, Ben Carroll stared down questions from reporters over contesting for the top job.
We have a Premier and she's working harder than anyone every day. I want to serve Jacinta Allan and I want to make sure... No, I've got a young daughter at home and I couldn't be more proud to make sure she grows up knowing that I supported Jacinta Allan to be a world-class Premier and get re-elected in her own right.
Are you going to try and get the Premier's job tomorrow?
No.
Are you going to ask her to step aside?
No.
Can you look her in the eye and say that?
I can look you in the eye and say that, Premier.
Well, let's go live now to ABC Radio Melbourne Mornings host Raf Epstein for more. Very good afternoon to you, Raf. Now, the Premier, I believe that she's currently meeting Labor ministers right now. What exactly would be going on?
I wish I knew. Look, it's this remarkable prospect. Keep in mind, the Premier's in a cabinet room with her cabinet. So that includes the man, Ben Carroll, who's told her she's going to challenge her for her job. It includes ministers who, before cabinet, went along to her and said, look, you've got to quit. She told them they should resign. They told her she should resign. They are now supposedly sitting around the cabinet table. Normally, they'd be considering how to actually run the state that they've been governing for most of this century. I mean, it must be quite an extraordinary cabinet meeting. It really is. It's like two cars driving at each other on a road. Neither are willing to make way.
So she does, though, seem quite defiant this morning, saying, the intention is not to stand down. Where do you think this confidence is coming from for her?
Well, she's always been rock solid in her belief about her own abilities. I think she and her allies also feel that the people who are instigating this and doing this, that it's about petty factional squabbles, that they have never provided her with the clear air, that an alternative wouldn't make any difference anyway, that it's all about the performance of the government. I should say, it's all about the track record of the government. That's what they will be running on. Where does the confidence come from? She's been in Parliament since Labor surprised the coalition and won a big swag of regional seats in the last century. She's been there ever since. She was alongside Dan Andrews the whole way through. She's been in charge of the major transport projects that are now such a focus of the corruption allegations. So she is 100% identified with practically everything this Labor government wants to talk about and say, look, we can give you more of this. The key thing that would change if Ben Carroll were to be successful, the first thing that would happen is we'd have a royal commission called for by a Labor government into the Labor government's supervision of all of these allegations of corruption in the construction industry. So they are definitely at loggerheads. My guess would be the Premier wants to see a show of hands in caucus. They're due to meet 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, all of the Labor reps in the Victorian Parliament, 10 a.m. Melbourne time, Her supporters the whole way through have been very confident that the challengers don't have the numbers. The challengers dispute that. There were some factional chiefs who met last night here in Melbourne. The Premier and her allies have always said, look, they're not the right factional people you need to be talking to. They are not the people that actually control the factions. Don't forget, Jacinta Allan is there, not because she won an election, but Dan Andrews resigned. The left are dominant in Victoria as they are in the federal parliament. The left handed the leadership from Dan Andrews to Jacinta Allan. And Jacinta Allan and her backers still say they are in control of the left faction. What's interesting about the delegation of people, of ministers and MPs who went to see the Premier before Cabinet, that included some of the ministers I was really keeping my eye on as the swing votes within the Cabinet. There's a real change among those ministers who went to see Jacinta Allan. They haven't been willing in the past to say, look, it's time to move on. They are now willing to do that. But Jacinta Allan's pretty confident that they don't have the numbers in caucus. I will say this as well. The plotters, if I can call them that, they are very confident. When you speak to them on the phone, they are very sure that if it does go to a vote of caucus, they will have the numbers. But the reason Jacinta Allan's holding on, all of those changes that were instigated because of the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd revolving door, it would mean that if Jacinta Allan does decide to stay, does decide to contest, the vote goes to the members. And over, 4, 5, 6 weeks, there would be a contest that would ask every rank-and-file Labor member who they want to lead the Labor Party and thus the state. Keep in mind, if that takes 6 weeks, we're 12 weeks away from caretaker mode. So it's this extraordinary standoff, just as Victorians are focusing on who they might vote for in November.
So for people who don't necessarily understand what this leadership challenge could look like, you outlined there it could be not just days but weeks. The actual mechanics of this is that the state could be finding out its leader not necessarily in the next few days but potentially in the next 6 weeks.
The plotters' intention was always to hold that prospect up to Jacinta Allan and say, look, you don't have the support of the Labor people in Parliament. Do you really want to test the support of Labor people outside the Parliament if you don't have people inside Parliament supporting you? They always thought, and I don't know why they thought this, by the way, they always thought, oh, Jacinta Allan would fold her tent and go away. If anybody has ever known anything about Jacinta Allan, and these are people who are quite critical of her and people who love her and think she's fantastic, she was never going to give up. She's never said publicly or privately, she's never given any hint that she would give up. The plotters were always convinced that they could stare her down and essentially embarrass her into resigning. It hasn't happened yet. It could happen before 10 o'clock tomorrow, but I haven't heard an indication from anybody close to the Premier that she's anywhere near doing that. And just the fact, some ministers came along, said you've got to go, and she said, you know what, you should resign. By the way, off we go, we're having cabinet. That doesn't sound to me like someone who's going to give up easily. And this party now has to consider the prospect that while they're fighting amongst themselves, they're also preparing for an election and asking people to vote for them. It's an unholy mess. It could all resolve itself. Who knows? Maybe one of them backs down. But I don't see any prospect of that yet.
And just in the 10 seconds that we've got left, Raf, in a couple of words, how are people living in Victoria, the ones that you're speaking to on radio, feeling about all of this?
Confused, angry, upset, bewildered, surprised. There's a range of responses. I think no one can quite believe it's happening.
ABC Radio Melbourne Mornings host Raf Epstein, great to speak with you. Thank you.
Pleasure.